Alright, we're going to continue our fraction kick here, and we're going to talk about how to find equivalent fractions. Okay? So your steps to find equivalent fractions. First, you're going to multiply the first denominator by a number that gives you the second denominator. Okay, so we're going to figure out how do I go from one denominator to the other one. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the numerator and multiply the first numerator by the same number that I just used to give you the second numerator. Alright, now those steps just listed by themselves might not make a lot of sense, so let's go to the example and see what I'm really talking about here. Okay, example 3 says write a fraction equivalent to 1/2 that has a denominator of 100. So they're telling me I want a fraction that's equal to 1/2, so I'm going to start with 1/2, and I want a fraction that's equal to that. And I want a fraction that has a denominator of 100. Remember, denominator is the bottom number. Okay, so step 1 up here says to multiply the first denominator by a number that gives you the second denominator. So I need to figure out what do I multiply 2 by to get to 100. Well, to get from 2 to 100 I have to multiply by 50. Okay, that's step 1, is to figure that out. Then step 2 says to multiply the first numerator by the same number to give you your new numerator. So I'm trying to find out this numerator right here. Okay? Well, I need to multiply by the same number I multiplied the bottom by. So I'm going to take the top number times 50. And 1 times 50 is just 50. And here's my equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 100. So 1/2 and 50 hundredths are equal to each other. Okay, they're equivalent fractions. Alright, let's go on to another example. They're also going to ask you to compare fractions. Okay, when I compare fractions, the first thing you're going to want to do on most of them is to rewrite each fraction so they have the same denominator. Then you're going to compare the numerators. Okay, so let's go into the example and see what that means. So I'm comparing 2/3 and 3/5. I'm just going to rewrite the problem so it's a little bigger here. 2/3 and 3/5. Notice step 1 says to rewrite each fraction so they have the same denominator. I need them to have the same bottom number. So I have to figure out what's the number that 3 and 15 go into. Okay, now there are different ways you can solve this. One of the easiest ways you can always solve this is to just take the two numerators and multiply them together. Okay, now that's not always your best option, but it is always an option. So you need to figure out what's the number that 3 and 5 both go into, and that number is 15. Okay, 3 and 5 both go into 15. And then I'm going to rewrite here because we need to write some equivalent fractions. Alright, so now I figure out, again, I'm going to do the same thing we just did on the last slide. I need to figure out how many times does 3 go into 15. What did I have to multiply it by? Okay, well 3 times 5 is 15. So I need to do the same thing to the top. 2 times 5 is 10. So my new fraction for 2/3 is 10/15. Alright, and I'm going to take that, just write that over here. 2/3 equals 10/15. I'm going to do the same thing for 3/5. I'm going to convert it into some number of 15ths. Okay, so I need to figure out how many times does 5 go into 15. Well, I take 5 times 3 to get 15. I have to do the same thing to the top. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so my new fraction there is 9/15. So what I did is I took 2/3 and changed it to 10/15. And I took 3/5 and changed it to 9/15 because those are much easier to compare. Now all I need to do is compare the numerators. Okay? Well, how does 10 compare to 9? 10 is bigger than 9, which means that 10/15 should be greater or bigger than 9/15. Remember, my alligator mouth eats the larger number. Okay, it's hungry. So 10/15 is more than 9/15. So that means that 2/3 is greater than 3/5. Okay? Alright, let's keep on going. Alright, it's time for our third and final objective of the lesson. Objective 3 is to write improper fractions as whole or mixed numbers. Okay? Again, a couple definitions we need. First one, An improper fraction. Okay, an improper fraction has a numerator that is bigger than the denominator. So an improper fraction has a top number bigger than the bottom number. So it could be 10 over 4, or 7 over 6, or negative 5 over 3. Okay, it could be positive or negative, just the top number has to be bigger than the bottom number. So that's what an improper fraction means. And we're going to take those and write those as whole numbers or mixed numbers. Okay, a mixed number is a number that has a whole number and a fraction. So a mixed number would look something like 2 2/3, or negative 3 4/5, something like that. Okay, where we've got a whole number with a fraction, and we got a whole number with a fraction. Okay, so that's like saying 2 2/3 is 2 plus 2/3. Okay, negative 3 4/5 is like negative 3 plus negative 4/5. Alright, putting them together. So let's use that to talk about objective 3 on the next slide. Alright, so here's our last examples. It says to express each improper fraction as a whole number or a mixed number. Alright, express each improper fraction as a whole number or a mixed number. And there are two methods that we can use for this. Okay, so I'm going to put A right here, and B is going to go over here. Okay, and our two methods. Our first method that we can use is called grouping these. Okay, so I can take 10/3 and I can split it into equal groups of thirds. Okay, well, I want to make those thirds equal to 1. So how many thirds would be in one whole? Well, that would be 3/3. Okay, 3/3 is equal to 1. Those are the same thing. Because if I simplified this, I could divide the top and the bottom by 3 and get 1 over 1. Alright, so 3/3. And I want to see how many groups of 3/3 can I fit into 10/3. Well, there's 3/3 so far. I can have another group of 3/3. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/3. I can still get another group of 3/3 in. So now I've got 3 plus 3 plus 3, that's 9/3. And then I've only got 1/3 left over. Okay, so I've got 3/3 plus 3/3 plus 3/3 plus 1/3. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 is 10. And the bottom always stays the same when we add fractions, so that's 10/3. Well, again, 3/3 is the same as 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1/3. So I've got 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. Oops, let me erase that line. Try that again. Okay, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3, and then I've got 1/3 left over. So here it is as a mixed number. 10/3 is the same as 3 and 1/3. Okay? Another way we can solve that same problem, another method you can use, is to divide 10 divided by 3. Because when we divide fractions, we always take the top divided by the bottom. So I can do 10 divided by 3. And ask myself, how many times does 3 go into 10? Well, it goes in 3 times. And 3 times 3 is 9. And I subtract and I get 1. Okay? When this number, this remainder, is smaller than what I have left, what I was dividing by, I can write that as a fraction. Okay? My big number comes from my answer up here. So 3 is the big number. And then my fraction, my numerator, comes from my leftovers, my one leftover piece. And my denominator comes from my number on the side. So it's still 3 and 1/3. Okay? And again, where did those numbers come from? This went here. And then this one went up top. And then the other one went here. Okay? So that's where the different parts of that problem go. Alright, let's do the same thing for example B now. Example B is 12/6. Well, again, I can do the grouping problem like I did to start with the first one. I can think about how many 6 are there in one whole. Well, that would be 6 6. Okay? Well, 6 6 isn't quite 12 6. I could do another set of 6 6. Now all of a sudden, I've got on top 6 plus 6. That is 12 6 already. So I'm done. Okay? 6 6 is equal to 1. This other 6 6 is equal to 1. So 12 6 is equal to 2. So it gets written as a whole number. Okay? And again, the other way I can do that is the dividing method. I take the top divided by the bottom. Well, 12 divided by 6 is 2. So my answer is still 2, either way. Okay? So that's how to take an improper fraction with a numerator bigger than a denominator and write it as a mixed number. And another way to take an improper fraction and write it as a whole number. Okay? And that's our lesson. Happy homeworking.